Good morning. I always heard it's a good practice to just stare your audience in the eyes, to just decompress and break the nerves. So yeah, good morning. So really quickly, I want to attempt to try to not butcher the name of my absent co-presenter. Her name is Rami Toolgood. I'm sure I'm butchering that, but Rami was the production lead on this. I oversaw the sort of conceptual design, but she was the one actually in the weeds, generating these animations, etc. And we're really happy with the final output. So today I'm going to be presenting on this thing, which is available to all of you via the Map and Geospatial Hub website. This is my unit at ASU Library. And it's true, as Jonathan said, I'm a geographer who happened to sort of infiltrate this library infrastructure. I kind of consider myself a feral librarian, but I am a geographer by training, not a librarian. But my job, I have a really fantastic job, which is to really oversee a fantastic collection of maps and other types of geographically referenced information, aerial photographs, etc., and all sorts of other geospatial data. And I just want to briefly, it behooves me to quickly mention how all of you can access the presentation that I'm delivering right now, because that's really the point. We want you all to sort of go home and be like, wow, that was a really intense fire hose of information that guy shot at us. But if you want to do it on your own pace, at your own time, please check out the Map and Geospatial webpage. I'm sorry that I'm shamelessly promoting my unit here, but you can access this at simply geospatial.asu.edu. And if you visit our projects page, you'll see all the cool things we're up to. And you'll see this project here called Visualizing the Survey, and I invite you all to please check that out on your own time. I also can't help but plug a new grant project that we just got, and hopefully at a subsequent instance of this conference, you'll hear me and my co-investigators talking about a new grant project that we're pursuing called Dutton's Atlas, which of course is based on the 1882 tertiary history of the Grand Canyon with Atlas, authored by Clarence Dutton, which is, of course, is the first monograph of the United States Geological Survey. But that's before, that happened chronologically before the collection of maps and the series of surveys, rather, that led to the collection of maps that I'll be presenting on today. So we're talking about plans and profiles of the Colorado River. And it really is a self-contained exhibit here. I'm not going to read verbatim off the slides. I will try to consolidate some of this stuff for you all. But again, I invite you all to check this out in your own time. I'm going to riskily put this in autoplay mode at a slow pace. Let's see if that works. So in the early 1920s, between 1902 and 1923, teams from the United States Geological Survey surveyed vast swaths of the Colorado River. And these surveys produced a series of technical sheets. In the engineering world, in the civil engineering world, they're called plans and profiles. But they're not traditional maps, and they're not traditional infographics or charts. They're a really fantastic integrated way to visualize hydrogeographic data. And what I'm going to do for all of you today is really break it down, because although they are indeed beautiful, they're slightly technical. And what I'm going to do for all of you is really just hold your hand and guide you through this fantastic collection of maps. Again, a feral librarian, a geographer acting like a feral librarian who gets to look and curate maps every day. So in 2020, late 2020, we decided to digitize this, and actually there's an interesting sort of social media history behind this. Tom Martin, who I think is not here today, but he put out a post on this Facebook group, right? I'm sure many of you are members of it. If you do any of that nerdy stuff, it's a great group, and he had one or more of these plans and profiles, and he put it up, and he was like, hey, how come I had such difficulty finding these maps? These should be so easily available. And I'm like, well, I run a map library at ASU. Why are we not making these more easily available? And the truth is, I'd identified this collection in our broader collections, and I had plans for this. So when I saw Tom Martin talk about it in this Grand Canyon History Facebook group, I jumped to action. I was like, we're going to make this happen. So let me tell you more about it. This is the physical format. They're embodied in 3 physical volumes. Obviously, we digitize them. The entire collection consists of 63 sheets, and those sheets are split up between both plans. We'll call them maps. I will use the terms plans and maps interchangeably. They're divided into plans as well as charts, which are, I'll use the term charts and profiles interchangeably. And so these 3 volumes here are divided into basically the geographical extent of the surveys to which the maps correspond. So the first section starts at the junction of the Green and the Colorado, goes all the way down to Lee's Ferry. That was the sort of they don't run chronologically in the same order they don't run chronologically downstream. They basically run in counter order, with the lower Colorado River section being the first surveyed, because of course those landscapes are more easily accessible, and those had been surveyed at the turn of the century, 1902, 1903, and then they went back in 1920. So that's the southernmost section from Boulder Dam to the Sonora border with Mexico. The most iconic, the most famous volume is the 1923 volume, which of course was conducted or led by Chief Topographic Engineer Claude Hale Birdseye in 1923. Many of you know more details about it than I could ever speak about. And the northernmost section, the junction of the Green down to Lee's, was done sort of in the middle. Anyway, you could read about the details. I don't want to sort of swim through the weeds here, but each of these physical volumes has a certain number of sheets, both plan sheets and profile sheets, and 63 in total. We'll skip through that boring stuff. All right, so I want to break down how these things work, because when you understand how they work, you really appreciate the cartographic design and the brilliance that went into constructing these survey sheets from the even more arduous surveys themselves. So each volume corresponds to and is named for one of the three main survey geographies. Each is identified by that section. I already went through that. The junction to the Green, Marble Canyon to Boulder Dam, which of course is Hoover Dam now, and Hoover Dam to Sonora border. So on each one of these sheets, or in each volume, is included a plan map here, or a key map. And each one of these key maps can be further broken down. So that's really what this exhibit is about, really breaking down the mechanics and how to interpret and make sense of these things. So we're seeing the survey geography go through here sequentially. And so plan sheets are these small sort of geographical entities, not the smallest geographical entity, but the penultimate. And we'll talk more about the sort of geographical hierarchy here, but each one of these key maps is broken down in one of these plan sheets, and each one of these plan sheets covers or corresponds to an actual physical sheet. Bear with me. I know that's a lot of jargon and nerdy library stuff, but bear with me here. So each one of these plan sheets, each volume has a certain number of plan sheets. As we move down here, we'll see how each of these plan sheets is broken up. And I'm going to return to this later and get into the mechanics. But first, of course, I'm sort of embarrassed to even attempt to try to add any historical insight here, because all of you know this history far better than I do. But of course, the Colorado River has been an essential North American water artery since long before the creation of the modern nation states that we all sort of take for granted. The United States, Mexico before it, and New Spain before that. But of course, as we know, native peoples such as the Mojave, Wallapai, and Paiute had based their communities on or around the river for countless generations before any American or European colonization and imperialism. But as we all know, the mid-19th century imperatives of war and manifest destiny prompted the United States' first surveys of the Colorado River to assess its potential for military transport. And I'm sure most of us are familiar, obviously most of us are familiar with the Joseph Christmas Ives survey conducted in 1858, 1859, the report from which was published right at the beginning of the Civil War in 1861. So all the Eastern bureaucrats in Washington, basically the whole country, was preoccupied with the American Civil War. So it didn't really get the attention, the publication of their report, which was quite fruitful in terms of cartographic advances, even geological advances, with John Strong Newberry being the geologist and naturalist and physician on the Joseph Christmas Ives 1858 survey. But they produced these fantastic maps, and they were really assessing the potential of the lower Colorado River for military transport. Of course, we had out here in this region, Mormons or the Saints, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, increasingly at war with the governmental apparatus of the United States proper, as well as various disputes with Native Americans. So the strategic potential of the Colorado River was of interest to Washington bureaucrats. But that was in 1858. And throughout the late 19th century, of course, we know there was a succession of mapping expeditions. We all know of our good friend John Wesley Powell in 1869, his subsequent expedition in 1871, 1872, which was actually mapped out right here, right? Every time I come through Kanab, I always make sure to visit the John Wesley Powell plaque, which honors Dellenbaugh and others, and the local community members who supported that effort. But the thing about John Wesley Powell, he's often credited for mapping the Colorado River. The truth is, though, the main maps produced from the Powell expedition weren't actually published until decades later, when Dellenbaugh actually wrote his own memoirs from the 1971-1972 expeditions. Powell did, of course, testify before Congress. I think, and Richard Quartaroli here can correct me, I think it was 1874 or 1875, when he famously wrote that, and I'm paraphrasing here, that basically the Colorado River had been thoroughly explored and no new mapping expeditions were needed. And of course, that was a strategic rhetorical statement, because at the time there were major debates in the country about who would control the mapping apparatus of the United States. For so long, it was under the purview of the War Department, because mapping was seen as a military endeavor. But eventually it moved into the Interior Department, and it took a lot of rivalry and intense competition between the main survey parties to determine which government bureaucracy would ultimately oversee mapping. And of course, that led in 1879 to the consolidation and creation of the United States Geological Survey. But forgive me, I digress talking about all that. But it's great history. In the late 19th century, a succession of mapping projects were underway. Powell in 69, 71, 72. Powell became second director of the United States Geological Survey, and then he became a bureaucrat, right? He was based in Washington, and he had to sort of relegate his continued explorations and geomorphological analyses of the Greater Grand Canyon District, the Greater Grand Canyon region, to who would eventually become his great friend and protege, also another polymath just like Powell, Clarence Dutton. And Clarence Dutton produced that atlas, 1882, Tertiary History of Grand Canyon, the first ever atlas produced for the Grand Canyon region, major geological advances, fantastic cartographic advances, and that's what that Dutton's Atlas project I was plugging a moment ago is going to talk about. But the point is, apart from all these digressions, is that not much work was done in terms of large scale. When I say large scale, I mean magnified, zoomed in maps, detailed maps of the Colorado River corridor. In steps the United States Geological Survey, and this happens to be, and I'm sure, I think another presentation, this is a really well-known archival, approximately 45-minute film. Apparently the first film also created by the USGS in 1923, photographed by the chief hydrologist on the Claude Hill Birdseye 1923 expedition through Grand Canyon. And this is some of the first USGS footage ever created, and one of the first black and white films distributed nationally. So we took a couple snippets of this. This is a 15-second snippet here, but it's really fantastic. And just seeing some of these black and white films, and this is actually in real time. So you really have to be patient with the way these things flow. It's not sort of the quick, short attention span things. Just seeing this arrow, it's really captivating. So that's on loop. Check that out. And I don't want to belabor this. I already spent so much time on those other digressions. But we know the 1923 Birdseye expedition with Burchard, LaRue, Moore, Kolb, of course, others. And here's another little snippet from that I really like. Another snippet from that archival footage. I'm just cruising through here. You should see one of those boats coming through in just a moment. There we are. Rocking it. Literally rocking it. Yeah. So the Colorado River was, of course, sort of kicking a dead horse here. We all know this. The Colorado River was eventually dammed in several locations. I'm sorry, forgive me, my friends. I forget, to explain the context of this. Why was the United States Geological Survey out there? We're no longer looking at the river for military transport. Right now, we're entering a new stage of history. We're entering a new stage of modernization, really a stage of hydrological control. The river is seen as unruly. New human population settlements are springing up, and agricultural lands are getting intermittently flooded. You have all these different states competing over land rights, etc. And so the federal government wanted to step in and basically say, how can we control this unruly Colorado River? Thank you for that. And so the intention of these surveys was to really assess the river's potential for hydrological control, where to put the reservoirs. And you needed to map down to a sufficient level of resolution, to a large enough scale of the map, to determine the canyon land's capacity to serve as reservoirs. How much water can this canyon land topography hold if we were to build a dam in one of these hypothetical spots? Fortunately, of course, none of the dam locations surveyed during the 1902-19 through 1923 surveys, plural, was ultimately selected for hydrologic dam development. But we do know two major dams, the Glen Canyon Dam or excuse me, I should say in chronological order, the Boulder Dam and the Glen Canyon Dam were ultimately built, and they forever reconfigured the hydrology, the ecology, the geography, all the rest of it. They forever reconfigured nature in the name of progress. I'm going to briefly go through this geography section, but you all know this geography better than me. I moved to Arizona in 2016, relatively late in the game. I visited Grand Canyon for my first time in that same year, 2016. I'm really pleased on a personal level to report that I'm taking my first 30-day private Colorado River rafting trip starting on November 1st. So I'm going to be down in the river for 30 days. It's sort of a lifelong thing for me. I know all of you are veterans and you're like, oh, I did that decades ago, but we all have to start somewhere, right? So I'm going to get really intimate with this geography more than I ever have. Of course, I've done a couple rim to rims, and I hike throughout it as much as possible, but I aspire to get on your level of geographical consciousness and understanding of this region, intimacy with this region. So here we combine some cool imagery views with the sort of curated flow through the geography. All this is an interactive map, so if I wanted to, I could sort of move this around, and I invite you all to check this out and really have fun with these surveys, et cetera, later. We have some cool imagery of the dams themselves to really contextualize for layperson audiences. Admittedly, you are not the main audience for which this project was developed. We're really trying to curate and bring the value of the Colorado River to lay people who maybe have never stepped foot in Grand Canyon, will probably never go on a raft through the Colorado River. So we're really trying to show the significance of these technical sheets from not to get academic on you all, but from a sort of scientific perspective and a political economic perspective. Maps are really instruments of power. The realm of geography was for centuries so much used for geographical intelligence, for control and imperialism, et cetera. And in the era of 20th century modernization, it's just a different type of control. It's not about conquering exotic peoples and lands, et cetera, but it's about conquering nature itself. So that's part of my fascination. When Jonathan talks about our mental maps and our geographical consciousness, I'm going to go a little over because I was starting a little late, my friend. But thank you. I will. Thank you. But yeah, check this out. It goes on a curated view of this map here. And of course, we all know that as the Colorado River winds around the Walhalla Plateau here, it reveals its sculpting masterpiece, the greater Grand Canyon region. And I'm going to flip through this and get to the real meat and potatoes of this thing, which is the mechanics. This is, I think, the most enjoyable part of this, is where we break down how do these things work, right? And again, there's nothing we do at our humble little map library is rocket science, but it's quite fun. And thank you, right? Is that all clarified? Hey, cheers, brother. Thank you. He was telling me 2 minutes. I'm like, hold up. So back to mechanics, and I'm going to try to slow my cadence a little bit here. So let's get down to mechanics. These plan sheets, which I mentioned before, are the main output of the survey. Understanding how they work, how these things can be interpreted, is essential to understanding the plans and profiles collections itself. So let's break it down. So if you recall, each of the key maps is further broken down into these little plan sheets. And if you're holding the physical volume, each sheet corresponds to one of those sections. But it gets a little tricky. Bear with me here. So this is what a sheet looks like. It's beautiful. We cropped through all the sort of ornamental stuff around and the technical metadata. But as you can see, I mean, in and of themselves, they're gorgeous, right? But there's more to them than just their beauty. And as a cartographer myself, I really appreciate the work that goes into just something as simple that, forgive me, I'm going to really geek out here, but something as simple as real estate. Real estate on the page. people in graphic design or cartographic design or just visual communication, how do you optimize your canvas, right? So, and I know I'm maybe fetishizing this, but how do you ensure that you optimize your canvas while minimizing dead space? And I really just give it up to these cartographers and their, literally 100 years ago and earlier for their design here. So each of these sheets contains, and we're making up some of this vocabulary. No one calls them segments per se, but we're defining our own glossary here. But each of these sheets is comprised of these segments here. And again, nothing we do is rocket science. You could probably already deduce what we're doing here, but it's quite a fun activity, especially in the digital world where we can sort of manipulate these digital images without having to cut these original survey sheets. We can digitally cut them, and we can extract the extracted segments and connect them to one another. So we have these lettered borders at the edges of each segment to connect them, right? It's a cool little design here. And so we could sort of extract each of these segments, and you see where this is going clearly. And then in the digital world, not only can we extract them, but we can georeference them and then overlay them on contemporary imagery. And I'll talk to you in a moment about, so what, who cares, right? Yeah, it's cool, it's visual, yeah, so what? Well, there's a lot of potential visualization and, more importantly, analytic applications that can come from this sort of work. And of course, I don't mean to make it an afterthought, but they are a small portion of this broader collections of plans and profiles, but it does warrant brief mention to sort of interpret these profiles. The profiles themselves go along the elevation of the river itself and depict its gradual descent from the junction of the Green and Colorado down to the Sonora border. Really beautiful work all the way around. And ditto, you can connect these little things. It's quite fun. Connect them at the river mile markers, and as you true river aficionados know, the river mile markers have changed over time. So, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. So, yeah, through some simple georeferencing work, as I mentioned earlier, we can visualize the surveys in relation to other types of geographic information, such as the contemporary river mile markers, or, and this is my favorite graphic in the whole presentation here, or, so we did some basic image adjustment. These are indeed the same plans and profiles. We just changed their rendering so they could be more visible atop the contemporary satellite imagery here. But what I really love about this graphic is that we see, of course, that giant reservoir, Lake Powell, right? But it wasn't always. Lake Powell used to be Glen Canyon, right? And maybe Glen Canyon is increasingly reemerging as Lake Powell becomes Pond Powell, as I've heard some boaters joke. But you can combine this with other geographically referenced or referenceable information, such as these historic aerial photographs from other USGS collections. And we could see, the original course of the Colorado River. It sort of makes you romanticize, of a landscape long gone. And of course, there's many scientific applications for this. Looking at geomorphological change, of course, with modern remote sensing methods, LiDAR, light detection and ranging, which produces sometimes sub-foot, meaning smaller than a foot resolution data, extremely large scale, very high resolution magnified data. It sort of precludes some of these methods, but if you're doing historical longitudinal analysis of the course of the Colorado River, this sort of work is really interesting. And so I'll briefly talk or show you this, one of these sort of culminating climactic pieces that we just want to sort of include to excite you all about some of the possibilities for visualization and potential analysis. So this digital curation exhibit we put together has other interactive features like this cool swipe feature. And you could see, I mean, this is just one small section. This is just one small segment from one plan sheet from one volume. And recall, there's 3 volumes, and each volume consists of multiple sheets. Ultimately, there are 63 total sheets of plans and profiles. But you can even look. I mean, this is, of course, the famous heart of the Grand Canyon, the main hiking corridors. And we see cremation dam site, Horn Creek. Excuse me, I'm looking at different potential dam sites here. This one doesn't have too many. But when you really look at different segments of this, and especially when you georeference them upon other data, trails, cultural sites, whatever sort of geographically referenced information you want to overlay with this, it starts to beg some interesting questions that maybe wouldn't have even been questioned prior to visualizing them. And of course, with modern GIS, Geographic Information Systems tools, you can not only ask interesting questions, but hopefully come up with interesting answers. So, yeah, and then of course, I'm almost done, my friend, no worries. And then of course, we could stitch large segments together. We could stitch the whole collection together. It's quite a labor of love. It does take a lot of work to do this, especially to do it correctly. But here's sort of the concluding note that I want to end with. How do you get this, right? So this isn't just to show you a bunch of cool visualizations. I'm a feral librarian, right? My point, my job is to make this stuff more easily, here's some library jargon for you, more easily discoverable. How do you find stuff? And of course, the crux of this, not only easily findable, but easily accessible. So, fight it out later, guys. I'm staying right here. So you can use this interactive spatial index to view each individual sheet. And so my point to all of you is this is not just a presentation, a one and done. This is for all of you to go home and have fun with and to access these maps for yourselves. They're really fantastic. And of course, here's a small thumbnail version. And that, my friends, will do it. Come on, bring that hook. I'll get out of here. Thanks, everybody.